Welcome again to my view from the piano bench, which, if I'm facing forward, is right here. But thank you for being here, especially to those of you who are regular watchers or followers or listeners or fans or people or whatever you want to say. And thank you so much to those of you who provide support and encouragement via the links available on the support page of my website. And you'll see the link in the description of this video if you're so inclined to take a look around, see what's going on. And that link is, of course, directly to the support page from which you can navigate other places. But take a look if you're so inclined. In particular, the Patreon, which is a very easy alternative kind of tip jar arrangement. You'll see what it is. All informal, no pressure. I'm just glad you're here. And there are encouragements along the way to just keep me going, which is great. So every Wednesday night at this time, I'll show up on my YouTube channel and talk about experiences in music and sometimes leading to, or often leading to, perspectives on things. This is not educational exactly. It's not just for musicians, it's for anyone, but I hope at least at times it is inspiring. Every week there is a topic, and I have a funny name for this topic, but it makes sense to you if you've followed me before on a couple of levels. And the topic is Sullivan's Steakhouse School. Now, if you're coming at that cold, then you're thinking, okay, I was trained to be a chef in a steakhouse, and that's where I went to school. Or my school class was held at a steakhouse for some reason, or whatever. But if you have heard me say much of anything over the months or years that I've known you, or you've known me, the stage is our school is a sentence you've heard me say over and over again. The stage is our school. Experience is where we learn, particularly coming up as an old school jazz player, where it isn't about the academic acquisition, although that's always beneficial if done the right way. But the jazz itself, the playing itself, it's learning by doing, it's learning by living there. It's another thing you often hear me say. So opportunities to play are good, whether you're a student and or even a beginner student, and you force yourself to play for company when you have it, to make yourself play for people. Start there. But when you are doing this at that next level, or whatever level this is, the experiences that really teach you are those when you're actually performing it on stage. And in the case of Sullivan's Steakhouse, and many of you have heard me talk about this, it's a chain that is an upscale arm of the Lone Star chain. And somewhere 20-something years ago, maybe 25, 23, I don't know, but a good while ago, Sullivan's was, I imagine, smaller than it is now, although it's not a small chain. It's an arm of Lone Star, but it's got a limited number of locations throughout the country, and it is themed old school. And for the first decade or more, it's changed now, from what I understand. I haven't done that gig for years, but it was essentially a jazz gig, but it was a jazz gig in the old school approach. And it was kind of a throwback atmosphere there. And it was one of those, what I would call, places in the trenches where musicians get to work. And in some of those locations where Sullivan's were located, and that was a redundant sentence that was unnecessary, on the off nights of the week when even like famous jazz musicians, weren't working, whatever, they could get themselves scheduled in the Sullivans, and it's as good of a bar gig as you're going to get. And back before they had the indoor smoking ban, it was a cigar bar. It's upscale, and the thing just took on a life of its own, as everything does. And those ongoing gigs or ongoing relationships that we have as professional musicians become, in the larger part of our school or our continual learning, their own curriculum or their own unique classroom. And that was certainly the case for Sullivan's. And I was, more than anybody there, the guy who represented what, if management, and by the way, when I say management, I could potentially and often do mean clueless, but still, sorry. If management had their way, everybody would be coming from that older, like, stride piano or swing era kind of thing. But a jazz pianist of some notoriety around here, anyway, or in the greater Philadelphia area, he got the gig of scheduling the musicians at Sullivan's. And he kind of was able to steer it eventually away from necessarily being the old school, but I was, I enjoyed being there because I knew I was a fit. It's similar to when I started at the Showboat, similar in some ways anyway, where I was recruited because of specifically what I did. Kind of the case here too. So I would go to Sullivan's, and initially for me it was a lot of solo piano gigs because they had music in the cigar bar 7 nights a week. I think it started 6, went to 7, and it was just whenever they were open, there was music. And I could play the old tunes like I like to play. And that's always fun. And I think in the timeline of this, this was after the Showboat and after I had built up somewhat of a decent music therapy practice, but was still gigging full time as a concept. And, Tuesday nights is one of my regular nights at Sullivan's when I had a long day of several facilities starting early in the morning. Nobody enjoyed Tuesday, in my family anyway, because I wasn't around. And by the end of the day, everything hurt. But anyway, little old school music. There we go. They never know what's going to happen. No, bring this over here. All right. So I didn't necessarily. That was almost cliche-ish in the playing. I mean, I purposely went old school, and I didn't do that all the time, but I could, and more so than probably any other of the pianists who played there. Which is just a matter of circumstance and not a judgment of any kind, really, because a lot of great musicians have played Sullivans all the way across the country. So when I got the gig, I actually was there when the Sullivans opened, the week it opened in Wilmington, Delaware. And I also, for a while, was in the rotation up in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, which is a bit of a further hike. I was a little more north of where I am now at the time, so Wilmington wasn't bad at all. Less than an hour anyway. And I went in there playing solo. And these were, if I remember correctly, 5-hour gigs in the evening. And I did not mind playing solo piano for 5 hours. With breaks, of course. It gets a little tedious sometimes, but not really. And in fact, it's really my happy place playing solo. I love playing with the musicians too. Don't get that wrong or me wrong, but more than most other musicians, because music making is generally a communal, a collaborative, a group thing. You have to have, the unique sort of head with all the gremlins in it who just want to play amongst themselves to be okay playing a ton of solo music. I just watched a documentary, there's a parentheses insert, but not unrelated, on Dave McKenna. It's finally finished, but it's only available on a subscription service, Quest TV, which is worth looking into. It's like $6 a month. It's concerts and documentaries curated largely by Quincy Jones. It's his baby. And I understand why, or at least I assume I would understand why it got placed on Quest TV, because they never raised the money that they were hoping to do it. And so this connection with Quest TV exists, and that documentary is there, and you can take the free trial, I can't talk today, of Quest TV, and in that window, just watch a little documentary on Dave McKenna, the key man. It's poignant, inspirational, and very poignant and sad, and mostly poignant, and great music. And there was some line he was quoted as saying, just like, because he played a lot of solo piano. That was his thing. That was his path to being, I would say, famous for what he did, for those who knew. He says, I when I play the solo piano, I don't always like it, but I don't hate it, which was kind of a quite a positive thing from what I'm understanding that come out of Dave McKenna's mouth. uh, and I would say at least that. Don't come close to hating it, and usually really, really like it. And like anything that I do, when I'm in an environment, I'm looking to push out the edges. I'm looking to, make something of it. You're always looking to grow. And I don't mean necessarily push out the edges in a mischievous way. I mean, expand what those possibilities are, which is the lifelong pursuit of an artist or somebody who plays music. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate or communicate clearly the difference in perspective between someone who views the music business as the entertainment side of it in terms of kind of making it big or getting a hit or that kind of thing, not coming from that place, but so not success. It's about, okay, here's what I can do. I've got this 5-hour gig, 1, 2, 3 nights a week or whatever it was on a given week, and I can try things out. I can experiment. I can, I can push myself in terms of tunes, in terms of keys, and specifically when I was thinking about what I could talk about from Sullivan's Steakhouse School, which is actually going to easily be at least 2 of these videos, maybe not back to back, but because I only got a few experiences in and to fill up the time. That's when I was, of course, heavily playing left-hand bass. Whatever tune I'd be playing, and I'll really kind of demonstrate example-wise something. So I'm going to use the same tune. I'll use a tune. There'll never be another. I like it as a ballad. The jazz guys swing it, and that's what I'm going to do. And for me, that kind of thing. Most jazz players would, especially younger people, coming up, I say younger, my age and younger, would play as if there were a combo. But I'd like to fill up that space. So I got the idea, I should teach my left-hand bass how to take bass solos. I just like this. So that was one thing I pushed myself. And but it's this gig, sometimes people would pay attention. But if you're in a background music gig, you can't just phone it in, even if you think no one's listening. There's more to it than just you're doing something to get a paycheck. Although a lot of musicians, or at least a portion of them, think primarily that, which turned out to be part of Dave McKenna's problem. But that's if you watch that video. So let me slow it down a bit. Now let's let the bass play by itself. It almost sounds like a bass solo now. And in fact, playing a quarter note bass solo is a thing. Bruce Kaminsky used to talk about that, and I played a ton of gigs with Bruce. He's going to come up in a minute. Not show up, but I mean, yeah, he's in the script here. And he would make the point more than anyone else I've ever heard of the importance of a bass player playing a quarter note bass solo. But in the jazz sense, a bass player is, trying to be independent like anybody else. And I had enough chops, I had enough ability to walk and do all that. My left hand is not in the same shape as my right, and I don't try to balance that out. I just try to improve on both. So what I would start to do try to sound like a bass player. And actually, I didn't do that well at this point because I haven't done that for a long time. Cross over with my right hand because my right hand's used to soloing, and I'm like saying, no, okay, I can do that, but no. My bass player, this guy right here, hand, is going to learn how to solo. So you start by giving him some space. Let him play quarter notes all by himself. And then, try to do something fancy and either trip and fall down or not or whatever, and learn what your balance is. And that little classroom of Sullivan Steakhouse, eventually I got to practice and play 5 hours a night. And this actually isn't the best tune to solo on. I don't know why I picked it, but anyway, I'm gonna keep playing it. So let me play. Let's see, 3 choruses. Actually, what I was going to do first, now that I'm looking at my notes, there's no one right or wrong way to do any of this, was I was going to demonstrate it by playing the melody first in the bass, which in a jazz setting, there are occasions, it's not always thought of or done a lot, but the bass player can play the melody just like the horn player can, or the guitar or the piano player can. So there's a melody, there's a thing going on. So let me play the tune, I'll play it 2 or 3 times. Melody, I'll let the bass player solo, and then maybe I'll stop. Right? So one solo chorus, the bass player got it. And who knows when I would have had the opportunity to shed and shed and shed and shed. I mean, you do that when you practice, and by shed, I don't mean like my skin falls off. I mean practice. I think you know that. Out to the woodshed, right? And this is balancing act that, not a balancing act. There's a context for everything. Let's just put it that way. So I am having fun playing solo. Now, that wasn't the only thing that was happening at Sullivan's Steakhouses. The restaurants were all starting out doing multiple shifts. And the solo would typically be earlier, and there might be a trio that played later. And that'll be for another video. We're going to stick with this piece of it. And I was perfectly fine, as much as anybody could possibly be, just going in there playing solo. So occasionally, I would run a little behind. They get me anywhere on time, right? Which, it was such a laid-back thing that it didn't matter. You make sure if you start a little late, you make sure you give them the time you're supposed to. That's what it amounts to. And it's been a long time, but I seem to remember that, when I could, I would give a call, say, I'm going to start 15 minutes late, I'll make it up, heads up, and it's all good. Well, it was one week I was running late, and it was either not possible or inconvenient, or I just chose not to call, and I'm getting in there 15 minutes after I'm supposed to start. But that's okay, I'll make it up, and nobody really cares. And then there is this bass player standing by the piano, waiting for the piano player to show up. And there was Bruce Kaminsky. I'm like, what? And Bruce goes, yeah, these are duo gigs now. Didn't Don tell you? And I was just like, well, primarily I was super embarrassed. Because since Bruce is sitting there with his bass, just in his chair waiting for something to happen, and actually, given that it was Bruce, he could have started playing by himself, and he's totally capable of that. But he didn't know what was happening. There was no communication with him. I didn't know to communicate with him. And so it was all kind of awkward. And as much as I, love Bruce, really grew to love Bruce, it was like, man, my solo gig is gone. Oh. So, like, slightly grumpy that night, the best I can remember. But then all of a sudden now, these gigs were duo gigs. And the largest part of my experience over time at Sullivan's was in these duo gigs. And one of the wonderful relationships I developed there was with Bruce Kaminsky. It's a kind of thing where you really become friends even if you only interact with each other on a gig. But you do it enough, it's just like, the gig is kind of like an extension of home, right? And so like you're kind of going to home in some sense, and there's this guy who lives there too, right? And so it was actually really, really cool. And we had our little routine. We could both be creatures of habit, and we're creatures of esoteric philosophical conversation, which happened incessantly on the gigs. And one thing we would do is we would pick a break, and the Sullivan was in a shopping center, and across the parking lot was a Panera Bread. And wouldn't you know, we could take a 20-minute break. We did it most every night we played. Walk to Panera Bread, stand in line, get soup, wait to have it, sit and eat the soup, come back to Sullivan's, 20 minutes, start the next set. That was one of our little fun routines. Another of our more relevant fun routines was retooling some tunes, playing, sometimes things are kind of silly, It was just slightly, speaking of silly, I need to find that YouTube video of this band. I forget what country they're from. Is that like a trad jazz band, but they married when the Saints Go Marching In and Giant Steps. Oh my goodness, it's hysterical. It's great. But Bruce and I were coming from really different stylistic places, so it was fun for both of us. And I would call it like Count Basie meets Eddie Gomez, That's where we should have landed with it. But one of the things that we would do is like reimagine tunes. Joy Spring was one of my, I guess really still is one of my token bebop heads. I'm more like an old standards Great American Songbook guy. But okay, way to play Sloppy Joe. But I tried to play it up tempo, the contrast to like, what if Basie played Giant Steps? And Bruce and I would have fun with tunes like this. Something like that. After I started the tune, I'm realizing, hope I remember where everything goes. I haven't played this tune in a while, but I think it worked out all right. And actually, oftentimes we play Joy Spring a whole lot slower, like the Count Basie Little Darlin' tempo. It was fun. But what the deal was that there was a central musician scheduler, booking person essentially, whose job it was to schedule the musicians, and he would kind of insist that there aren't any set formulas, but he kind of allowed Bruce and I to work together a lot. But you might not even know who you're playing with on a given night. And one of the other Philadelphia area bass players, great bass player that I got the privilege of playing a lot of gigs with, was Steve Scrone. He's roughly my age, maybe a little bit older, slightly. And back in the day, he was on the road with Ray Charles and did stuff with Pat Martino and Horace Silver and movie soundtracks and all kind of stuff. You know, he's one of these, you know, great trenches guys, right? And he teaches up at University of the Arts, where Don Glandon, who booked everything, I think chairs the Jazz Studies department, or is chair of graduate Jazz Studies or something. And Don was the guy I studied with privately a few years. It was the only real actual jazz instruction I had, which was an interesting time, which I've talked about some, and maybe I'll talk about some more. But Steve and I really enjoyed playing with each other. It was a whole different experience. Let me see. I'm going to write down something. I'm going to write down the word front edge of the beat. Because one thing that I totally learned, to talk about school, from Steve, both in interacting with him as a musician, listening to him, and talking with him about it, it's the idea that beat or pulse, you know, has some width to it, right? And we all kind of find our way as to where, you know, where we touch it. And a lot of times you think like a solid bass quarter note, ba-dang, 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 ba-dong, ba-dang, ba-dang, right in that center. But what Steve would do, and it was amazing, is he would place his note on that little front edge of the beat, where like you're feeling like you're falling off of it and going forward, which means you're going to start speeding up, and I can certainly speed up. But he holds the tempo intact, and that drive is in the fact that that quarter note is right in the front edge, and it's totally acceptable. You know, it's great if you can pull it off. And there are guys too. I didn't even think of this, but there's one bass player in particular, really, really fine bass player. But his approach was the other back edge of the beat. It was a much more of a struggle to play with that bass player, as good as he was, because I tend to just fall off the beat and speed up. You know, so but everybody has a tendency to go with one or the other. It's in large part, I think, just a temperament personality thing. But just the art of deliberately managing where you are touching that beat, which you think is just one spot, but it's this, you know, there's a width to it, and you can get inside of it. Mastered that, total master. And I know one tune he really liked, is he recalled, you know, some gig he did, or a series of gigs with J.P. Morgan. And J.P. Morgan, you know, could sing the snot out of These Foolish Things Remind Me of You. So even though Steve was definitely, you know, a much more like contemporary influenced jazz guy than I, you know, all the jazz players who are out there doing things are schooled in the traditions because they work there too. And so we would intersect in places like that. So I would remember to call These Foolish Things because Steve liked to play it. That's right. What a nice tune. These foolish yous remind me of things. These foolish things remind me of you. Yeah, and Steve was another thing I learned, not from Steve, but through working with Steve, is to navigate a bass player who has impeccable time. I wonder what that was. I meant to actually mention when this started, when I started this video, that we're having a nice rain outside. And I just heard this thud, so you might be hearing little noises in the background. No thunderclaps so far, so I think we're good. But anyway, Steve's time was great, but his conception of soloing was, and not that the time was bad, but he abandoned that groove thing and he floated. Very floaty solo player. And I had a little trouble, you know, I mean, you got to remember too that whatever my age along the way, especially as I got older and just did mostly solo stuff, even though I've been a full-time musician all my life, my experience in playing with other musicians is less than most everybody else. And especially in like the floaty, more contemporary thing, like where's the beat no one's defining, and I guess it's right here, kind of thing. And so I was motivated to walk my bass lines underneath his soloing in what I would call self-defense. But whenever I play with a bass player, I ask them, do you mind if I do that? Because a lot of bass players actually do mind. You know, they feel like you're getting in their space. But still, a sentiment with bass players is we don't want the groove to go away just because we're playing and everybody just stops doing things. And when the bass player plays a little higher in the register, they're often more open to walking underneath. And you're not trying to take their place. You're trying to give them the kind of support that they're giving you. And some bass players really like it. Some bass players don't want me to go near it. Others are like, yeah, go in and out of it. It's fine. It's cool. But Steve, more than anybody, really, really liked it. In fact, he loved it. He loved for me to walk underneath of him, which was great because it's kind of the only way I knew where the beat was when he was soloing, right? And I didn't think of a tune. Yeah. So, I did write a tune down, and it's another tune that it's funny why I chose that. I don't play it very often, but I guess that's why I chose it. And so I want you to just imagine now that I'm going to play a tune, Just Friends. I may play it with a Latin feel for the head, for the melody. So when you see a musician do this, they're not scratching up here, there. Informing you the head, the melody, the top, head, melody, right? Bridge. All right. Off the bridge into the abyss. Yeah, so I'm going to play a Latin feel head. I'm going to swing it. And then I'm just going to comp underneath, which means I'm going to provide the rhythmic accompaniment as if Steve Pasquarone or some other bass player was soloing. And you can imagine it happening. And one thing that I'll do... I'll do like little embellishy chords up here. Embellishy? Yeah. Rather because if I'm comping down there, I'm really boxing them in. So I'm giving them the space. So you can imagine a floaty bass solo, that third chorus probably. Now just go. Tune goes. Why did I pick it? Let's pick another tune. All the tunes. Here we go. I guess I'm not going to play Latin. I'm just going to play Swahili. I'm going to take a solo first. Something like that. But did you get the image, at least, of, there's this space, and I'm giving the foundation underneath, and I'm playing actually the bass player's part, ensemble part, while the bass player is soloing over top of it. So, and after one of those tunes, one of the most memorable moments of being a musician that will always make my heart warm, because this is Steve Biscrone we're talking about, great bass player. And he comes out of the tune, he just looks at me and smiles and says, "You're a great bass player." Thank you. Oh my goodness. But I love doing that. I don't know if that was particularly great. I don't think it was, but it was really cool validation. But then, if I put this into the school analogy thing, it's like, yeah, part of the thing that you get in school is, some validation when you figure something out. You get a good grade on your lab report or whatever. So that was cool. So speaking of Steve Biscrone and soloing, woo! So Steve, in his gigging, when he got off the road and he just settled back in Philadelphia, I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think he's done like road stuff for a long time. And he explained and it made sense. And I won't repeat it in any detail. Why he chose to stop doing that. At least some of those experiences. But he's just in that first call circuit to do all the gigs that will be there to do in different arenas and not entirely jazz. And theater gigs, professional theater gigs, or because I know of a friend, bass player down here, Max Murray, who doesn't really play a lot of jazz gigs anymore in his post-military musical career, retirement from that. He does a lot of DC professional theater, loves doing it. And so Steve was coming off a 1 month run where it was either every night of the week or one night a week off or whatever. But a 1 night a week, 1 month, all just straight reading musical theater, right? No jazz gigs. And no jazz gigs for a while thereafter, if I remember correctly. And I didn't think this through ahead of time as to what that was going to mean for me that night when he was scheduled for me in Sullivan's for his lone escape from the theater and his lone, ability to do a jazz gig. But after the first tune, and he took not kidding, 7 or 8 choruses when it was his time to solo, I'm like, okay, I get this. Steve's got all this stuff pent up in him and he's got to vent it out. And that whole evening was just going to be one giant bass solo, And I was cool with it. It was like, okay, good. I'll give him that. And he likes when I walk behind him, and it's good. And you may be familiar with the kind of cliche-ish joke, which is ridiculous, but it's like, it's okay to talk during the bass solo, and no one listens. Everyone talks during the bass solo, But that was an environment, of course, where everybody was talking anyway. It was a bar environment. It wasn't a listening room, so everybody's talking. We're going to have bass solos all night. So, and if I remember correctly, this is many years ago, but if I remember correctly, once I figured it out, I limited my solos, and I just played, 1 or maybe 2 courses on a tune, and then I gave it to Steve, and he lived there forever, every tune, chorus after chorus, because it was just all in him. All that improvisation couldn't come out. For me, I can play solo stuff. The pandemic was very impactful for all of us, and certainly for me, but not in one particular way, which is I really couldn't express myself in playing. I just couldn't play with other people, but I'm perfectly comfortable playing solo. Other instruments, not so much, including bass, you can do it, but if you're going to solo with bass, you're going to have something behind you, or solo with any instrument typically. And so that was just a fun memory of being where you need to be. All right, so I didn't even get through the experiences that I wrote down here. So whether there's a part 2 next week, or I'll take one of the experiences and make it its own topic, I don't know what I'll do. But let me just lay down some quarter notes and play a little blues progression. And try to be the best bass player I can, Mr. Steve Viscarone and Mr. Bruce Kaminsky. Thank you guys for giving me all those wonderful gigs with both of you, and all the other cool stuff that happened at Sullivan Steakhouse. Even if at one point along the way, years down the road, I walked away from it, which I guess I could explain later. Isn't this kind of funny? It's like how we, end the gig. You might play behind the singer, the star up front, and and thanks for being here, and we'll see you later, and sign up for my mailing list. I walk up the stage and you play them off. I think I'm playing myself off here. this little thing. And I didn't really do it that time. That little like extra half note, eighth note thing I put in there, that's what Steve would always do. And I just like, yeah, Steve, you influenced me. That's how I play bass now. Because you're a great bass player. Yeah, back at you, man. Woo. All right. So, thanks again for being here. So appreciate it. And on Thursday nights, I'll upload Piano for My Friends, which is a cocktail hour style thing. I'm really saturating my YouTube channel with these videos, and I would have never thought I would have, done that. My YouTube channel pretty much was just performance clips. Up until the pandemic, it was, and I did this on purpose. I didn't record stuff from home because I had gigs that I could record and, kind of document the gigging world. And it all got changed in the pandemic. And Facebook just got really weird and stupid to do live streams and all of that. So thank you for dealing with me cluttering up my YouTube channel to continue to put these videos up there. I hope to continue to do it. Consider supporting if you're so inclined. But just keep, stay in touch, and I'll hope to see you very soon. Thanks so much.